Hi and welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to discuss with the example of popular fitness YouTubers slash influencers such as James English and Joe Lindner, or I don't know how to pronounce his name, why 60 milligrams of testosterone, or using a specific study to prove that it's a bit suboptimal, well, very suboptimal according to well-known science and the literature that's published around these low doses of TRT. So again, I just want to recap on the previous video. I mentioned p-values and I kind of just skipped over it, but I think it's quite important when looking into the literature to see whether or not the findings are significant or not significant. So again, I'll just show you a table of p-values which indicate significance and non-significance. So a p-value is essentially the chance of you getting the result you got under the assumption that your null hypothesis, and the null hypothesis is what is assumed to be that so essentially, where in this case that TRT will give you no difference, that's a null hypothesis, and you assume this is correct, and the p-value is the chance of getting this result if it was indeed correct. So in this particular study I'll reference, I'll just give you examples. This isn't as thorough, and you should definitely go look it up and just do a bit of statistics, especially when reading all of the medical literature around hormones and such. So in this particular study that I'm referencing, the null hypothesis would assume that the 125 milligram testosterone group will have no change to their LH. That's the null hypothesis. However, if we look at the study, the value, there was a significant change because the p-value is 0.0001. So the chance of you seeing that result they have published, or we've just observed, if the null hypothesis is indeed correct, is about 0.01%. So it's extremely rare to get that result, and thus we reject the null hypothesis, saying that reject the notion or null hypothesis that there is no difference to the LH, as it's very unlikely for that to, as it's since the chance of seeing what we did observed, assuming it was true, is very, very unlikely. However, if we look at another example, the null this would be the fat mass example. So the null hypothesis would assume that the change in fat mass is not different. And if we see here, there is a slight gain in fat. However, the p-value is 0.8, which would mean that there is a 98% chance of you achieving this result, assuming the null hypothesis is correct, which is there being no change. So it's very, you don't accept the null hypothesis, you just reject you fail to reject the null hypothesis. So that's just a quick crash course into statistics and such, which are important and I think is overlooked by a lot of individuals reading studies, especially on this platform. So another issue with this study that I'm about to reference, which I mentioned in the previous video, is that there was no control. So there wasn't any group not receiving testosterone and with the same initial statistics as the previous, or stats of the previous groups, or as the other groups. So as we see, so in this video we're going to mainly focus on the 50 milligram group because this is closest to the 60 milligrams these fitness influencers claim to take, which the issue with this is it's suboptimal, and since they are influencers, it would influence other people's choice into TRT. And first of all, I do not think you should be on TRT if you don't have to, or if you're, and secondly, if you are in TRT, do not listen to these guys, or they'll claim to be genetic specimens, but we'll go into why that is not true. So as I mentioned, the 50 milligram group actually showed deleterious effects to their performance, so it was not optimal. So in the first case, both fat-free mass, you'll see that the p-values are not significant, so these stats are not significant, so we do not reject the null, which says that there is no change. We do not reject it, and we don't accept it either. We just don't reject it. However, when it looks at the fat mass, when you look at the fat mass they gained fat mass, which is quite significant if you look at their previous, if you look at how much they gained, 3.1 and 3.5, which would not be optimal, assuming that their fat-free mass was not, if that did not statistically significant or significantly change much. And in the 125 group, you'll see, again, not statistically significant. So again, and if you look at these individuals, you'll see that they are lean, or shredded as one might say, for the whole year. And according to the science, they would be would more likely gain fat mass as opposed to other groups. So, and again, looking at muscle volume, we see that, again, the p-values are not significant, whereas in the other group they are. And the quadricep muscles, not significant again. Leg press strength, you'll see, again, not significant in the 25 group, however in the 50 milligram group they did gain strength, which was statistically significant. But again, that's why I wanted there to be a control. Well, since, again, if you follow a structured plan, or as a natural, I would be curious to see, you should also gain strength, and I'd be curious to see if it was more or less the same as the 50 milligram group, or what I would assume is less, since they in fact gained more fat, which would produce more strength and not as much lean mass. So if we look at the hormone profiles, again, here there is a statistic significance in that the testosterone decreased, total testosterone that is, and free testosterone also decreased, which is not optimal and in the slightest. And again, the LH value showed that they were suppressed regardless of how much they took. And the IGF-1 values, again, not statistically significant. Sorry, pick my nose there. So, hormonally, it's a terrible base. If they are purely using it as a base to maintain sexual function and etc., it provides no benefit hormonally to use this 60 milligram per week dosage. It would provide no, it wouldn't be a good hormonal base, since you'd in fact have lower free testosterone. You'd also, and total testosterone, you'd be shut down, and your IGF, well, actually we can't take those results, but again, you gain fat mass and performance is barely improving. So I pose the question, what benefit does it give this individual? And again, if you were to look at them from although this is a kind of subjective, you would not assume for them to have suboptimal hormones. And I have heard that they are stacking other compounds on top of this. But again, it provides a terrible base. It's worse than that of being natural. Rather use therapeutic dosages. These are sub-therapeutic, as we've just seen. And again, in quality of life, you may say, oh, they're using it because of quality of life. Again, there is no statistical significance. So I don't see the benefits of using this approach. I'd rather, if you are making the decision to go on TRT, rather do it through someone who has knowledge about this field and knows the data, and do it as per the science says, which would not be the 60 milligrams that most fitness influencers claim to be taking. Although they say they use other compounds, it still provides a poor base. So again, they could claim they're just outliers, and they in fact have these high free testosterones on such a low dose. But again, I'll mention in my next video how if they're using underground lab testosterone, that is commonly overdosed and will provide false stats or results, and they'd have to be using a gold standard such as pharma grade testosterone, and we would see from there. And if they were, they would probably have suboptimal hormone levels. So rather take what they say with a grain of salt. Don't listen to influencers. Most influencers are not telling the truth about what they use, as there's benefit for them personally and for their egos to claim they use less than the other person, which, when looking at the science, shows that this is not possible, nor is it logically sound. So again, use science and data when doing your cycles or your research, and don't base it off these influencers who are most likely not telling the truth. Thank you.